Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians. And now your hosts, Chad Chubb and Tyler Olson.
Hey, I'm Tyler, and Chad and I are here for our first episode of the Physician Sense Podcast. We're really excited to share everything that we can with you about the financial education that will benefit you physicians. It's an exciting time of year, too. We know this is just past match week, and so there's a lot going on, and we're excited to do what we can to support you on your career journey.
I am excited to be here with you, Tyler. Feels like we have been months in the making for this to officially go live. Maybe you could argue years, right? You know, you're getting all this excitement going. We're building our relationship together. We are officially on the podcast, our YouTube channel. Like you said, very special time of year for the physician community with Match Day. We know a lot of you are getting very good news today, or if you're picking this up the next day. So congratulations to all the physicians that have gotten that great match. Hopefully everyone got their number one choice. We also realize not everyone gets good news today. So for anyone that did not match, we're here for you. We've seen this. We've watched many of our friends go through this, and we certainly understand that it's not great news for everybody. But keep your head up. The journey continues on. If you have questions, send them over to us. Let us know if we can help you anyway, just to try to connect this phase here. But we're excited. We're excited to get this podcast going, the first episode here, and we're going to cover a lot of fun stuff. So to get us started, first two episodes are going to have a lot of post-match conversation. What can we do to help you? And for example, today, we're going to hit three really important ones. We're going to cover budgeting, federal student loans, private student loans. What should you be thinking of? What are the big decisions to make? And everyone's favorite topic, I know it's your favorite topic, budgeting. Everyone loves it. And Tyler's going to get us fired up here with how he views budgeting and what you should be looking forward to. And then I'll throw in some ideas there too. So Tyler, what are we looking at here budgeting wise?
So budgeting, or another phrase I like to use is cash flow management, is it's difficult for every stage of life, I think, unless you've got like an unlimited source of funds, which is very few of us. But for those of you that are finishing medical school, you are likely living off of loan disbursements. Maybe you got your last loan disbursement in January. And now that you found out where you're going to be working this summer, you probably have an idea of like, oh, I'm going to get my first paycheck on, at the earliest, July 1, maybe July 15th, sometimes August 1, and sometimes even August 15th. Some program, it just depends on when your program pays out, if they pay every 2 weeks or once a month, and how many days after that pay period that you actually get the paycheck. So you've got this gap. Obviously you have some money left over from loan money in January, but now it's middle of March, and now you've got April, May, June, not just for living expenses, but moving, putting a deposit down on your apartment, being able to just pay for life. There's, licensing fees that you got to pay for. Mm-hmm. And so, but you've got no income. So this is not an ideal budgeting or cash flow situation. But what we want to talk about is the importance of knowing what is coming, writing it out so that you can best prepare for it. Even if you have to take out more loans to fund this transition, it is far better to know what's coming and to be prepared than to just let it hit you by surprise. So the rule number one is to itemize expenses that you know are coming. And I tend to put them into two categories. One is the things that you have to pay for every single month that are going to keep coming. If you have a car payment, for example, or if you have some sort of insurance premium or subscriptions, you know that those are coming and they're the same every month. And then the others are variable expenses. And those are things that are like, they move up and down a little bit, food, gas, and then also one-time expenses. So I guess there's three categories. Moving truck, deposit on your apartment. So you want to start with taking a couple of hours. And if it's just you, write it yourself. If you're married or you got a spouse or partner, you want to work with them to write out, make sure you have everything laid out. What are we going to need to pay for between this moment and end of July? And that starts to build out the cost of your living between now and when you start to earn an income. And that is like the big cost. And like, how do I pay for this $10,000 or $12,000 to get me from point A to point B? And it, even if you don't have a solution yet, even if you don't have 20 grand in savings, you need to start with knowing what your cost is going to be so that you can address it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. There's two sets of gap months, right? You have this gap month now from medical school to starting training. And then the other set of gap, which we're not going to cover today, but it's just important to always keep this on your mind, is when you go from training to attending. And there's a whole nother separate list of those one times and that gap and maybe moving again and all those items that come in there. We even get into like health insurance there. Do you go to Cobra? Do you not go to Cobra? There's a lot of moving parts there too. But I think that period of, hey, medical school is done, but my first paycheck in my intern year doesn't start until now, it's a really delicate time. As Tyler noted there, right? If you could have some extra loans, that's ideal. I'm sure Tyler can say the same thing. Like, it's not uncommon for us to have a younger attending join our practice and our financial planning practice and still have some credit card debt from one of these two transition periods, one of these two gap months, because it's a lot, especially this one coming up for all of you all, where there was really no income before that, for the bulk of you. So half of it is always just planning, right? Just sitting down, knowing the expenses, shopping things around, moving trucks. Kind of make a joke with moving trucks. I was like, you usually don't want the lowest cost option because your stuff may not arrive, but you probably don't need bubble wrapping all the way down to your t-shirts, right? You don't need that level of detail. But one of those ones where, this is one where you probably don't want the lowest cost option, and check with your programs too. A lot of programs might even have some things set up. We're not saying that they might help you, but they might have some preferred providers of, moving or maybe even real estate agents to help you find something in the rental market. So just understanding the big ticket items, see if you can shop them around a little bit, see if your program that you're headed into has any resources for you. I think that's that low hanging fruit that you got to pay attention to. It's not just, well, we'll wing it. We'll see how it works out. I think that's, you nailed it, Tyler.
Mm-hmm. Your point about reaching out to the program is a good point too, with regard to rentals. Some trainees have told me that their program has some preferred landlords or properties where they'll give the residents a deal in terms of the the security deposit. Because a lot of times in a normal situation, if the rent's $1,500, you're gonna have to come up with at least $1,500 for a security deposit. And sometimes they want first month's rent and last month's rent. It could be as high as $4,500 in that situation. Now, I think that's on the extreme side, and I don't think most people will encounter that high of a cost. But even if it's 1 month, even if you have to come up with $1,500, if you don't have that in cash, it might be really difficult. Talk to your program. Some have told me they're like, yeah, they do a $200 deposit because it's like an arrangement with the program. So make sure to talk to them and see what sort of things are going on locally.
Yeah. And, I think once you then kind of that next phase of it, right? So you're now in there, the paychecks are coming in, you are now a paid doctor. So congratulations. Now what do you do? And this is where budgeting is one of those topics where it gets a bad rap. And I agree with Tyler. We actually usually will call it more cash flow planning because budgeting has such a bad context to it now, but just getting some habits in there. And sometimes it's more often, sometimes it's less often, right? Meaning, how often are you going to actually budget, right? Is it one of those things where you get in there weekly? Is it monthly? Is it semi-annual? Are you doing a date night with your spouse, your significant other, where you review those? We have a few clients that do that. I absolutely love it. I think that's spectacular. But just starting to prepare now for budgeting, I want to get into some technology also that I think can make this easier for you. But what are you thinking here, Tyler, when, okay, paycheck has come in, what are your best budgeting tips here coming into it with, oh my goodness, I just got my first paycheck, maybe my first paycheck of my life, or at least my first big kid paycheck. What are you thinking here when we get started with budgeting?
So, the same principle applies of now writing out the living expenses going forward with, okay, now I've got my apartment, I've got my approximate living expenses in this new location, they need to be written out. You can use tech to, there's lots of apps out there that can be beneficial if that suits you. I keep saying writing things out because I need the writing and the visual to help me to put it into practice. I find screens to not be as helpful for me, but everybody's a bit different. So you have to go with what your disposition is. And then one aspect of making a budget on a resident salary now, I had one detail that I forgot to share about the transition that is relevant to this. And that is, if you didn't have cash saved to pay for the transition from medical school to intern year, and you had to take out a credit card or something, some people say, well, I have a credit score that's 700, and so I can get a Chase Freedom credit card and get a 0% introductory rate for 12 months. And I'll just put my expenses on there. And that's a great idea, but then you have to remember that and apply that to your now resident budget. Because if you borrowed $5,000 and you got 10 months to pay it off before interest starts to accrue on that credit card, you got to build $500 per month into your budget. That is a cost. And you may or may not be able to pay for those things. Like you mentioned, Chad, like you've had new attending physicians come to you with that credit card debt still existing. So I know I'm circling around here, but it's important to recognize that budgeting on a resident salary needs to be approached from being reasonable and understanding that you need to live life as a human, that some things may not be possible because you're pulling in $3,500, $4,000 a month at most. And some programs I know they're paying more these days, but most of them are in that range. And if there's other income in your household, if your spouse earns money, that makes a difference too. But if the money's not there, there may not be, it might not be realistic to do all the things that you want to do on a budget, right? Don't you think there's some scenarios where that's not going to happen?
Yeah. I love talking about resident pay because it's one of those ones where you and I get it, where I'm like, listen, from a US perspective, you're paid a pretty good number, right? That's a great salary. The problem is the salary doesn't match your hours. So that's where, Tyler and I and you as the physician are like, okay, sure. Yeah, it's a great salary. It's a good salary when you think about the average salary throughout the US. I know it's not fair pay for you. Believe me, you have two guys here that will yell from the rooftops for you all. But it's a number that's large, right? It is a fair, large number that you do have to pay attention to. And just as Tyler was talking there, I'm a note taker as well. New things are going to come into your budget. We're going to get into this here in a second, but student loans are going to come into play. You're likely at least starting to think about getting some disability insurance. These are things that are going to be new to your budget. And even thinking about the credit conversation, right? This is also a really important time. When's the last time you checked your credit report, your credit score? While you're making some big decisions now, these decisions are only going to get larger, as you go through your career, but then you become an attending, whether it's marriage now or later, but then starting a family. All of these things are going to be really important to that credit score. And I always kind of joke about a credit score because, you could argue the perfect credit score is actually not having one, because that means you never needed to take credit. But unfortunately, the U.S. banking system and credit system doesn't think of it that way. But, good student loan history, renting, good rental payments, that helps. Car payments, on time, proper credit card payments, credit utilization. That's another important one, which we'll cover all these in future episodes. But, if your balance is $10,000, your credit limit's $10,000, don't go to $9,000, right? You're trying to be smart here. But all of these are important. I know Tyler kind of noted pen and paper, and I agree with that too, but, utilize technology. YNAB, you need a budget, is a really good one. Tiller is a good one. I recently started using one called Monarch that actually a new client introduced to us. Monarch is fantastic. So just understanding that pen and paper, I think, does hit a different level. But if you can be more consistent with technology, or maybe it's a combination of the two, right? Maybe you're using tech, but then you kind of do that review. Just build good budgeting habits. Because if you can build them now at your current pay, and then you get your update into an attending pay, it's just, you're going to be one step ahead of the game at all times. So just always take budgeting. I say serious, but make it fun, right? Make it exciting. Make sure that you're not overwhelmed by it, right? Maybe weekly's too much, maybe monthly's too much. So find a pace, find a rhythm, but always know money in, money out. I think that's the main topic here with budgeting.
Yeah. Another detail too, for those of you who are IMGs, looking to even just get established in the banking and credit world in the US, as far as establishing credit, secured credit cards are usually the best option. If you have no US credit, you have to establish it. And secured credit cards essentially allow you to put money on the card, and then that money functions as collateral so that you can use that to buy things on credit, and that will slowly build your credit score up. And then as far as banking is concerned, you typically need to go with one of the national banks like Bank of America or Chase. They're well set up for those that are on like a J1 visa or other types of visas. And that way you can get into the system, because you got to have a place where your paycheck's going to go. And so those are usually my go-tos for those who ask, when they studied in school in another country and now they're here to train in the US.
Yeah, really good points. Yeah, even custodians can be picky with J1 visas, and some are easier than others. So again, we'll cover all this as we continue to build on it. But certain questions, especially coming from that community too, where they're newer to the States and they're just learning not only medicine, right? They're learning an entire new financial and financial planning system. Those are questions that we also love to tackle. You feel good on budgeting there, Todd?
Yeah, I think we covered it. I think we covered it pretty well. You just want to make sure that you know the money that's coming in and know the money that's going out, where it's going. And if you can make reasonable adjustments to be able to save something to build up a degree of cash savings for emergencies, that's a good start. And we will talk about emergency fund saving shortly in a future episode. But just know that, ideally, you'd love to have a little bit more money coming in than going out. Just see what you can reasonably do within your situation. But yeah, let's start talking about debt now, because what is it, like 87% of graduating medical students have student debt of some kind.
Yeah, student loans. And even just one last note on budgeting. Budgeting obviously is a topic that can go a million different ways. So this is a good point to say, send us questions on your budgeting. If you're watching this on YouTube or any of our socials, drop us a comment. It's one that Tyler and I could literally talk for decades on just budgeting. Mm-hmm. And then the next topic is also another one that literally we get breaking news on a weekly basis at this point. So yes, student loans, we're going to break it into two parts here. Federal, much more complicated, a lot more moving parts. Private's actually probably the easier one now. It's where you can get into more trouble per se, maybe in terms of rates. But let's get started on federal student loans. So you are a post-match physician. You're getting ready to start your intern year. Tyler, what are we thinking through here in terms of those federal student loans? And if you are that small percentage that don't have them, awesome. Yeah. That is fantastic. I feel like we're seeing that a little bit more often as we're seeing more and more medical schools offer, no tuition. So it's getting a little bit better, but, it's one of those ones, Tyler, where I don't know what number you balk at anymore. I don't have a number that I balk at. Usually if I see more than 500,000 for one physician, I get a little bit of a tightness going, but I'm like, it's not that we haven't seen it. We just don't see it that often. $250,000 is commonplace. And I say, this is one of the ways to know that you work with a financial advisor that only works with physicians, because we hear 250, 500,000. We're like, okay, all right, we get it. We got to do a little bit of work, but nothing. Where most financial advisors would say, oh, you have two houses? Is that your beach house? How's that student loans?
Yeah. No, when I hear 250 now, I'm like, oh, good. Yeah, that's not bad at all.
Easy. Paid off next week.
And then I have to be like, okay, Tyler, just pull back a little bit. This is not your debt. Because obviously $250,000 is a lot of debt. And so if it was mine, I would obviously not be taking that immediate gut approach. But we're saying that to you because in the long run, once you know what we know, and we want to share everything that we know about this with you, once you know that, you will start to have that same viewpoint. You'll be like, oh, okay, this is not the end of the world. Even 3, 4, $500,000. Like we can, I have a lot to say about tuition, and we don't have to talk about that right now because that'll really segue. But as far as like the reality of the financial impact, it is doable. But yeah, as far as like what to do, my go-to, and tell me if you think that there's any reason not to do this, but my go-to for every graduating medical student who had less than, if they're single and they made less than $30,000 last year, and obviously most of them didn't work at all, or they're married and collectively they made less than like $65,000. And in the previous year, I tell them, as soon as your school updates your status with the National Registry that you are graduated, you should log into studentaid.gov and you should apply for a federal student loan consolidation so that you can get out of the 6-month grace period, which is typically what happens after graduation, where you don't have to pay anything anyway. But the reason why I recommend they skip it and jump out with the consolidation application is so that they can get public service loan forgiveness payments, PSLF payments, started as early as August instead of waiting until December. And we can talk about the why, but like conceptually, is there any reason why someone shouldn't do that?
No, I would argue that's probably the best, if not the most important, probably the most important advice that you can provide right now for a post-match physician. And hey, here's your first step. When you kind of say, is there anyone that wouldn't? I guess maybe if you're sitting there saying like, oh, I know for sure I'm not going to be able to get PSLF because I'm going to go, a private route, or I'm going to create my own practice right out of school, or right out of your training, I should say. Maybe there you enjoy the 6 months without it. But like Tyler said, if your income was low or zero, your payments are, if there was nothing, or even, just take out the poverty guidelines, even if you had some income, you can drop that down to zero still. It's not going to hurt you. Even if your payments resumed, it could be zero for those 6 months that you would have been in grace anyway. So whether you're going to PSLF route or you were saying, hey, I'm going to just pay these off regardless, I'm sure we can get someone, one of the other larger student loan nerds out there, to give us like a very unique situation, but I can't think of one personally where you wouldn't be going through with that. And I think that's probably one of the issues with PSLF in general was there's never been good guidance on this. Now it's becoming more commonplace that we can yell this from the rooftops. But, I think if we go back, a few classes of physicians, they would say, and we have these clients that work with us, right? How come no one told us that? We thought 6 months, everyone did it. Where now it's like, no, don't do it. You probably had, no income or very low income that we can make a zero payment, get you 6 months ahead. That six months out of 120, sure, not a lot, but believe me, remember, you're removing those last 6 months of payments where your income is most likely the highest. So it's actually a really big little feature, a little step there that, hopefully most are taking at this point, or preparing to take at this point.
Yeah, think of it this way. At the bare minimum, an attending physician with their salary, they absolutely are paying at least $1,500 a month on the back end of a 10-year PSLF plan. And it's probably closer to $2,500 or $3,000 a month. Multiply that by 6, and that's how much more forgiveness you'll get on PSLF if you do the loan consolidation application right after you graduate. One other caveat, though, they have to file a tax return electronically. So if you're watching this mid-March, if you haven't filed a tax return because you didn't make any income last year, do it anyway. Because when you do the consolidation application, it's going to ask you to link your IRS tax return. And if you didn't file a tax return, instead of linking to a tax return which had $0, they may ask you for your pay stub, which is not $0, and your payment would not be $0. So I often say, like, go to Free Tax USA. You can e-file for free. And if it tries to block you from filing because you made no income, just put $1 of interest in the interest income section of the software. What have you any thoughts on that?
No, you nailed it. I mean, that's a great tip there, especially when this episode's going live, where you still have a month, call it a month, to get this filed, and even knowing the actual specifics of, hey, put in $1 in for interest so you can still get the free return. That's golden information right there.
Yeah. So you got file your tax return electronically. And if you're married and your spouse earned an income last year, you should consider filing your taxes separately. But I often will say, people ask me this, they're like, well, how do I know about my tax liability if it'll be better for us to file jointly versus separately? There's too many factors for us to just say, you should 100% do this or that. It is worth it if you're really not sure to pay for a tax professional to like just give you a scenario. You could also go through the software. I know you can do this. You can go through the software and put married filing jointly, plug in the numbers and see what your tax liability is, or start over, plug in the numbers after putting in married filing separately and see what the difference is. That would be another way that you could ascertain whether it would be detrimental for you to file your taxes separately. But in a lot of cases, it's good to file separately because you effectively prevent your student loan payment from going up by 10% of your spouse's income last year.
Yeah. To build on that, it's as we head into tax season too, we look at drafts for our clients because this is a very important conversation. And most accountants can easily run a spreadsheet for you. Not even a spreadsheet, it's an actual tax document, just married filing jointly versus married filing separately. And we ask our accountants to always include this for anyone with student loans because it's pretty simple. It'll show you, here's your tax bill married filing jointly, here's your tax bill married filing separately. You take that number, you compare it to what you're saving in student loans, and that's how you look at it. But to build on Tyler's point, this is a great example. So 2 tax returns I reviewed over the weekend, both physician households. Now, the one household was an attending and then last year of fellowship. So pretty good income spread there. But their tax difference was over $20,000, married filing jointly versus married filing separately. Another household, both attending physicians, very similar emergency medicine, very similar salaries. Their difference between married filing jointly, married filing separately, $200. So it just goes to show you, to Tyler's point, there's a lot of variables that come into play there. But get an opinion, whether you're working with a student loan professional or you have a good accountant, and then you can run the student loans. One of the largest savings we tell our clients that are our new prospective clients all the time is student loans are a big thing. And if you can spend some time or just pay for a one-time analysis with some of the student loan only planners, I can almost vouch for all of them at this point that you're probably going to get more than your money back, that one-time consultation fee and what you're going to save. And maybe you don't save it today, maybe it's a longer-term savings, but take some time. That is a big decision, not only your student loan payment plan, but then that also is going to directly correspond with, married filing jointly, married filing separately, if that, applies to you, if that pertains to you.
Yeah, no, great point. Now, as far as what to do going forward, like if you've done the federal loan consolidation application, you'll get it approved sometime during the summer, and then you'll start making payments of, likely $0 or something like that. And then people say, well, what do I do after that? You make the payment, if it exists. And then typically what I recommend is every summer, fill out the PSLF employer certification form. Now that's a PDF as well as a web-based tool where you can fill it out electronically and have it sent to your employer via email to have their signature. What that is doing is it is sending them a document that says, yes, you, a physician, were working full-time for our program, which is a nonprofit organization. Now, this is presuming you're not working at HCA or some other for-profit program. So if that's the case, then you will not be getting PSLF qualifying payments during training. But most programs are nonprofits, and you want to do this on an annual basis just to keep up, because you don't want to, you can catch up. Technically, you don't have to fill this out until year 10, but that would be insane because you don't want to lose track of people. You don't want to lose track of people that will verify your income. So you want to do this on an annual basis, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 1,000% with Tyler. My joke is always, now it's electronic now, which Tyler and I can vouch. That has been a game changer. That has made it so much easier. But my joke before that was always, it's a lot easier when HR is down the hallway and not across the country. Certified every year. And, to this day, I think everyone is always worried about, could it disappear? What if they remove it? And why I don't believe that's the case. It's literally in your documents that you're signing. I've always said, if you can show a track record that you were actively going for PSLF, that is also a really important spot. And we've always, I love the summer idea. We've always said, when you had to certify your income, just certify your payments as well. So it's kind of like your double reminder.
Yeah,
now that could pivot a little bit if you end up doing the automatic system that's now in play. We don't love that. We kind of like you having control of that situation. But again, everyone to each their own. But certify every year, just keep it simple. And now the website, it shows it, it's nice. It actually has a legitimate tracker, so you can actually see you're making progress. So yes, annual, make it easy, try to match it up with either summer when you are recertifying your income as well.
Yeah. Now, what about the payment program? Like which income-driven repayment plan program do you want to talk about first?
Yeah. And, this is one where we can probably have a whole nother episode, and we probably will actually, as we're talking through this, and we kind of lay out this outline thinking how much detail can we get into and still trying to follow up to our 30-minute guidelines. Save has been a huge addition. And Save has just been a crazy helpful addition. To me, the biggest benefit was now married filing separately. That was one that with Repay was always hard. Repay always looked pretty attractive, but you always, no matter what, you can do married filing separately. It's not going to help you. They still need to know your spouse's income. So to me, it was that. You could argue the 225% poverty guidelines has been a huge help. If you don't understand how that payment works, essentially it was a multiplier on the poverty guideline where it used to be 1.5, now it jumps up to 2.25, and that is a direct lowering of what your payment will be, because you're taking your adjusted gross income minus that discretionary income, and then it's going to give you your payment. Essentially, do your multiple of 10%, divide by 12. That's your monthly number. But it's just a huge benefit. So, for a lot of individuals, Save is likely the winner, depending on your future, especially in training. So if we're keeping this to post-match, Save is likely your winner here. I think depending on your specialty, and we'll build on this as we get into more episodes, maybe there's a pivot there to what we would label as the new IBR now, with Pay removing here this summer. But, I'd say Save has been really a huge victory for anyone going for PSLF, but especially in the physician community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's been fantastic. Well, let's plan on digging into that in greater detail. We're gonna talk about that in greater detail in an episode very soon. Before you actually have to make this decision at the end of May or early June, when you're when you're filling out your federal student loan consolidation application, because that's where you have to choose which repayment plan you're going to go with.
Yeah. And I would say, just based on the significance of that decision and the timing of it, we'll likely have our April episode have that right at the top. So we'll build on this literally for that next episode, because we wanted to give you kind of high level overview of federal and private today. But like we said, federal is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to it. We could have, episodes, seasons of student loan planning. So we'll build on that one. So tune into the next episode. We'll hit more details on the actual payment plans for you. But let's just say we have federal organized.
Yeah.
We have some private loans. What are we doing here, Tyler? What do we do?
To me, it's like a less terrible credit card. The loan interest rate is probably in the range of 9 to 15%, somewhere in there. And it needs to be addressed, because if it goes into a standard term repayment plan, the monthly payment is probably prohibitive for most trainees. I guess it depends on how much debt we're talking about, but it can be really expensive. So usually there's a grace period if it's a private medical school loan, but then it's going to transition into a payment that you have to figure out. Some of them do have deferment for 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. They will continue to accrue interest. You need to look at the terms of the existing loan and figure out what your best option is. The name of the game, financially speaking, in training is to tread water. Yep. It is not to become rich. You are not going to be able to pay all this off unless there's some other big source of income in your household. So it's about management. What can you do to have a comfortable payment? And if that means staying with the loan that you have now because it will let you defer, or the payment amount per month is reasonable, then don't try to fix something that's not broken. But if it's not something that you can do, then you need to look to refinance. I know SoFi, for example, they've got a great resident loan program where you can refinance, and they'll charge you interest like any other lender. But I think do they still have the $100 a month deal for like 5 years or something like that?
As soon as you started talking, I was thinking about that. I assume they do. I don't see why they would have removed that. I feel like I just saw that it's still out there.
Yeah. So that's a good option to consider. Yeah. I mean, interest rate matters, right? But what do you think? Like interest rate versus payment amount that's comfortable. How do you balance that?
Yeah. I mean, the thing with interest rates, right? The market kind of dictates the interest rate. You don't have control of that for the most part. The nice thing about refinancing student loans, it's not like if you're not a homeowner, refinancing a mortgage has a lot of cost to it. Student loans, you can refinance those things daily, and there is no extra cost to it. So it's one of those ones where you can keep an eye on rates and look to refinance. I think what you said, Tyler, on treading water was perfectly said. The odds of you having a situation where you can come in here and get aggressive are probably very slim. If you can, fantastic. But for the bulk of us, that's probably not the case. So getting a payment that's comfortable, even if it's a longer duration than what you want, and the longer the duration, likely the higher your rate is, it at least allows you to tread water. Your income is going to jump. You will have a chance to go after this. Interest stinks. I get it, but still, we can't do too many crazy things here. We just got to kind of work with what we have. So to me, it always comes down to interest rates part of the market. The term is likely one that we're probably going to have to spread out longer just because we need to keep that payment lower. There's only so much we can do with that budget. There's only so many numbers in there. So I think the key is just find a number that works for you, understanding that you will have your time. You will have your time to go after this and get rid of it. And keep in mind, like when you sign on to be an attending, there are different types of bonuses that if you were going for PSLF, but they offer in a bonus, and I would say academic medicine, you're probably not getting a massive sign-on bonus, right? So if you're going for PSLF, likely those two don't match up perfectly. But if you're going more private practice, this is one where you can say, hey, listen, if I do get that, I can come after that loan more aggressively. Or maybe you never get that, right? You never get that large sign-on bonus. It's all right. Our income is higher now. Now we can look to take advantage of that. And I know you have a lot on your plate, but keep an eye on rates. Maybe set a little Google Calendar reminder. Just check on rates, do a quick little soft quote on a SoFi or a Laurel Road or a Common Bond or any of the providers out there and just see what's out there. But I think, that is really where I'd be focusing on, is just finding that spot where you're comfortable with the private loans.
I also like credible.com, Credible. Yeah, they give you a good array of lender options. So
yeah, Credible also includes SoFi now too, which makes it a little bit nicer. So you're getting Credible will give you the only bank you're probably going to recognize on there is likely SoFi, and then a lot of them are more local banks. We're from Central Pennsylvania originally, so Citizens Bank was always really popular. Now Citizens has grown a lot, but you probably won't see a lot of banks that you recognize. That's okay. Those are still good student loan providers on there.
Yeah, good deal. I mean, we know there's a lot to process, and we could go on, but we want you to just be able to simmer on the three things that we've talked about today: cash flow management or budgeting, and starting to address your federal loans and your private loans if you have them. And then we're going to keep talking about relevant topics to you physicians in the coming weeks and months. This is really cool. I'm glad we could talk about this.
Yeah, this is awesome. Fantastic first episode. As Tyler just kind of gave our parting ways there, remember, drop us questions. We are literally here for you. When Tyler and I had our initial conversation on what do we build this as, it was based around you. It was literally Tyler drowning in those DMs saying, hey, we got to get to more of these. So we're coming here to answer your questions. So drop us questions. We want to keep it a fun flow. Hopefully you're picking up on that, but let us know what you think, what we can change. If you like my bright shirts, if you don't like my bright shirts, let us know, but we're building this for you. And we'll see you on the next episode.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Keels advisory services and financial planning offered through Vicus Capital, Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting, LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state-registered investment advisor.